You don't put a lot of.
Yes, dear students, this is Odong Paul, Apalokwang Trinity College in Abingo. I hope you are safe and you are following the SOP given the current precarious situation. I'm presenting this topic, the Mfecane in South Africa, right away from Trinity College in Abingo. This is a very popular topic that we are going to discuss, and I hope you are going to enjoy. In this topic, we are going to look at the background information, where we shall look at the definition, then the states that were involved in the Mfecane, then we shall look at some of the prominent leaders that caused the Mfecane. Then also we should look at the period when this event took place in South Africa. And thereafter we shall look at the general causes of this period. Then we shall look at the effects. Thereafter we shall conclude. So by definition, the Mfecane was a very troublesome state in South Africa. De Soto preferred to refer to it as the Mfecane, to refer to the period of forced migration from South Africa. This was a period that was characterized by bloodshed, killing, forceful migration, the period characterized by state formation, interstate conflict, outbreak of famine, and in summary, it was largely characterized by misery and suffering of the people, which even spill over to East and Central Africa. Therefore, by definition, Mfecane simply refers to the period of trouble in South Africa, the period of wars. Now, the states that were involved in this conflict were basically states of Mthethwa under Dingiswayo, the Zulu state under Shaka, the Swazi state of Sobuza, the state of Ndwande, led by Ndwande state of Uzwide. Now, as I'm trying to give these states, you find that some of the leaders are already mentioned. For example, Shaka Dingiswayo of Mthethwa. So, the Mfecane in South Africa started during the time of Dingiswayo of Mthethwa, and it reached the climax during the reign of Shaka. As I earlier on mentioned, this was a period of trouble. As we relate to our countries in Africa, very many countries have experienced some of these troubles, even in the modern time. Period of wars, suffering, bloodshed, among others. Now, in particular, the Mfecane occurred in early 1810 and went through up to 1830s and even beyond. As I said, some of the people who fled from South Africa, like the Ngoni, the Ndebele, they continued with this phenomenon up to Central and even East Africa. So in some cases, they refer to it as the conflict among the Eastern Bantu, which occurred in the early 19th century in South Africa. Now, let us go through some of the major causes of this Mfecane or Mfecane, depending on how you may pronounce. One of the major causes of this was the population pressure, which eventually caused the land crisis, conflict over land by some of the prominent leaders. Then we can talk of the rise of powerful leaders, especially Dingiswayo, look at Shaka, Zwide. Some of these leaders were very ambitious, and in an attempt to establish powerful states, they ended up creating interstate conflict. They came up with several military reforms that eventually led to this dangerous period of the Mfecane. There was Dingiswayo's meeting. He had a meeting with a European military surgeon in the name of Robert Cohen. So he gained some military knowledge, the use of umbrella, the use of the gun, which made him very ambitious in building the state of Methethwa. And in the process, it created a suffering to the neighbors. The desire to expand new states by these leaders. Then we can talk of Shaka's military reforms. As you are bringing out some of these points, you can bring them one at a time, because Shaka came up with several reforms. For example, he introduced the use of the short stabbing spears, known as the assegai, to replace the long spears, long-handed spears. He introduced a rigorous military training where the soldiers were made to walk for long distance on foot. The soldiers were to walk barefooted. This made them very, very fast and very fierce during the wars. Shaka introduced some reforms he introduced a shield, which protected the soldiers and made them confident in fighting their neighbors. The cow-on formation of fighting. Some books, they call it the bull-on formation. This made Shaka's army very fierce and very confident in fighting. In addition, Shaka ensured that the soldiers were not to marry until the age of 40. This eventually made them determined to fight and to have enough time to concentrate on wars, which eventually created this very absurd period of the Mfecane. Then Shaka's attempt to control the trade in Delgoa Bay also contributed to this period of Mfecane. He tried to fight those leaders like Zwide, who also had interest in the Delgoa Bay, causing interstate conflict. And even the death of some of these powerful leaders like Zwide, like Dingiswayo, of course, they were killed in a military situation. For example, Dingiswayo was captured by the Zwide's army and was taken to Zwide, who killed and took his skull to decorate his mother's hut or the house. All this created a situation of anxieties. Then the death of Shaka's mother, also known as the queen. This made Shaka to come up with the very tough rules, which created anxiety, suffering. For example, Shaka declared 90 days of mourning, where people were not allowed to drink milk. No woman was expected to be pregnant. Everyone was supposed to have sad faces in order to express that mourning. Therefore, anybody with a smiling face was killed. This was a situation that resulted into the Mfecane. Shaka also established what is called the age regimental system for both women and men. Age regiment, this is a system where people of the same age, which numbered around 1,000, were made to stay in one place, and they were to live through raiding, through attacking neighbors. In this process, the period of Mfecane evolved. There was constant raid and counter raid for cattle, which led to this dangerous period of the Mfecane. Then we can talk of the outbreak of drought, which eventually resulted into famine. This created a situation of survival for the fittest, where strong nations under powerful leaders attacked weak ones and eventually were able to raid to food and other things for survival. And this led to the suffering, especially on the victims. The Shaka also, we have already talked about the introduction of several military reforms. Then at the same time also the advent of the Europeans, especially the Boers who were trekking from the Cape to the interior, eventually created a land crisis, which eventually propelled these problems, leading to the Mfecane and the rise of defensive states. During this struggle, when powerful states were building their empire, the like of Shaka, the like of Zwide, there are some states that there are some people that emerged, some leaders like Sobusa, like Moshesh, in an attempt to establish defensive state, eventually carried out raids on the neighbors, which eventually led to the period of the Mfecane. Then there was also desire to control trade in South Africa by some of these powerful leaders, which also contributed to the Mfecane. Therefore, as we conclude the causes of this Mfecane, we realize that the causes were mainly political, because this was a military situation. The causes were a result of mainly military reforms and the rise of these powerful leaders that had the ambition of expanding their empires, thus causing a crisis in South Africa. Now let us look at the effects of this Mfecane. As already noted, that this was a period characterized by bloodshed, suffering, period of expansion of empire through military reforms and others. You find that the negative effects outweigh were to a greater extent more than the positive outcome of this Mfecane. So the Mfecane resulted to loss of lives. Thousands of people were killed, others were maimed, others were permanently disabled. There was great loss of property because of burning houses, destroying gardens. There was a loss of cattle due to raid and counter raid. There was a loss of independence, especially to smaller states that were submerged by the powerful states. States like the Apalokwang states, the Fingos, were submerged into bigger states. Then a loss of political status. Now, those leaders of smaller states like the Sekonyera were eventually disempowered and either became common people as a result of this Mfecane. There was a loss of dignity to leaders and to the elders, the parents. There was destruction of the family system as family members were forced to migrate to different places. Other people lost hope in life, loss of culture, among others. Then there was outbreak of famine because agriculture was not practiced as a result of the constant wars. So this famine led to starvation, suffering, and automatically death. There was a depopulation. So I want you students to distinguish between depopulation and loss of lives. Depopulation could be a result of death or a result of people migrating to different areas. So there was a displacement of people who had settled. There was widespread suffering and misery. There was collapse of some of the states. Some smaller states collapsed because they were unable to protect themselves. Then it also created a vacant land in the interior, which motivated the Boers to trek into the interior. Therefore, the great trek was partly a result of the Mfecane. Then there was the rise of powerful states. Can give an example of, there are two types of states in this case. The states that were created as a result of the Mfecane by those powerful leaders like Zulu state, Methethwa, states like Ndwande. Then there was the rise of defensive states. Defensive states, these were states that emerged as an attempt to protect themselves against the Shaka's harsh policies. For example, the Swazi state of Osobuza, then there was the Pedi state, even the Basuto state of Moshosho. This came as a result of the Mfecane. Then it led to introduction of new military skills. For example, the cow-on formation, which spread beyond South Africa. There were new military weapons, the short stabbing spears, the long shield, which were introduced. This made even Africans in the future to resist the colonialists. There was a spread of violence beyond South Africa, that is up to Central and East Africa. We have already talked about the rise of powerful leaders, for example, Shaka. There was even a growth of nationalism. This was evident in some of the people coming together to defend themselves, and at the same time, they later defended themselves against the European intrusion. Yes, we have already noted that this Mfecane resulted in two great trek. There was decline. Trade was disrupted as a result of the Mfecane. Now, in conclusion, the Mfecane had more of the negative impact than a positive impact, while the causes were mainly political, although some were social and economic. As we conclude, for more information, I always advise that you visit the link below. I remain Odong Paul Apalokwang, teacher at Trinity College in Nabingo, a 21st political philosopher.